Hi guys. Right, I've got to explode you with awe with this. My name's Derek. I'm from Outsource Accelerator. And I want to tell you about an industry that almost never happened. And I want to tell you about a $600 billion industry that potentially could happen, okay? And that prospect gets me pretty excited, and also I think it should get everyone in this room and the Philippines pretty excited as well. Super quick, 4 points, maybe if I get carried away, and then we can get to lunch. So what I want to do is first recap where we all are. Everyone knows which means converted here, everyone knows these figures, they're bandied around a lot. Outsourcing in the Philippines is big. Outsourcing worldwide is big, but in the Philippines, it's something pretty incredible. It employs around about 1.2 million employees. It's got around about 24 billion revenues, and contributes, I think, above 10% of the country's GDP now. It is the single biggest economic contributor towards the Philippine economy. This is a fantastic industry on many levels. It's a white-collar industry. People, this isn't industry, they're not down mines, they're not building cars. This is a white-collar, sophisticated industry offering professional services. These are highly skilled people, and it's an industry that allows, unlike a lot of other emerging economy industry, it allows people to increasingly professionalize and then build up the career ladder. As we've seen, a lot of people within the BPM industry progressing up the ladder. So it's an incredible industry. Also, again, still preaching to the converted, but this stops the brain drain of the Philippines. Previously, there's the OFWs, anyone with any skill, especially professional services, came to lead the country. Outsourcing, especially the high-value outsourcing, enables the Filipinos, the highly educated Filipinos, to build a strong career here, servicing high-value industries in the West. Because of all this, it really is economic steroids for the country, in that, again, it's high-paying, white-collar professional services that then supports communities. We see Cytel, we see all of these BPOs now go down into the next wave cities and building a strong entire nation, not just a core of So super incredible industry we have. But there's a lot of blue. And, I really only been in the Philippines about 5 years, and for about the last 2 or 3, the overwhelming narrative is blue. A sunset industry. We hear a lot about the tax changing things, we hear a lot about salaries, we hear a lot about the competition with India, and there's general apathy. When you add the concerns of AI and automation, you've got Train 2 coming in, salary inflations, there's, I think, real concern for the industry from the big players. So let's have a look at what I believe is the alternative future, and I'm hoping that this is a narrative that more people will begin to adopt, because I feel that wherever you set your sights, it's likely that you'll end up there. And if the Philippines sets its sights to be the next Singapore or the next Silicon Valley of Asia, then I believe actually the country can get there. I really do believe that. So my vision of the future is incredibly bright. I believe that there are 30 million jobs to be outsourced over the coming 20 years. Now that is an audacious claim, but I'll talk through that thesis as I go. The 30 million jobs are worth about 600 billion. This is a massive impact. And as this happens, there's increasing salary parity with the West. Okay, it's inevitable that the equilibrium of salaries will balance out. that's a good thing or a bad thing. Certainly economically, it contributes towards a very strong, bright future. So that, once again, I think, again, it's kind of crazy, but let's have a look why I think that could be true. So, first of all, let's have a look at globalization. I think, there's a lot of talk about AI. I think people underappreciate the rate at which the world is globalizing. People might be surprised to know that in 1880, in the UK is, I think, a little bit smaller than the Philippines, in terms of geography. It's a small country, and before 1880, there was no regulation of time zones within the UK. It's one small country. They had one town was 4 p.m., the other town was 2 p.m., the other town was 1 p.m. because there was no travel within those towns. People would never go to another town because it was considered another world away. Okay? This is only 1880. And then it was with the advent of trains, the trains and railroad roads and things like that, then in 1880 they realised they could not have a particular train timetable, and they sorted themselves out with a standardised time system. Now that's just incredible to think that that is only, that's kind of 150 years ago. And the rate at which we are globalising, so people didn't go from town to town in the UK. You could imagine, what they felt about Europe and then what they felt about the other side of the globe. Things were truly, truly separated. And that is no longer there. So there's three or four items that I really believe are contributing towards globalization at an increasing pace. The internet, obviously, my narrative of the video industry is that it really started when telecommunications got strong enough or cheap enough to warrant having people in the Philippines servicing the US. As the internet came, it obviously broadened that capacity. As the capacity of the internet increased, then again, and exponentially increased, then again, the capacity of the roles and functions that could be outsourced were enabled by effectively this technology, which made communications simpler, faster, more ubiquitous. So that did massive things for breaking down the relevance of geographical barriers. IP services, intellectual property, professional services, the world is moving towards service-based economies, okay? You can transfer incredible value over an email. If you know the answer to the Super Bowl outcome ahead of time, you could send that through an email and that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So don't, the value of IP, of intellectual property, of service, of professional services can't be undervalued. And all of this can be transferred via the internet, via emails, via all of these softwares, apps that are now being sort of built out. The move away from manufacturing, from industry, from farming, it used to be that 25% of the population had to work on farms to support the population. Now, people are freer and people are working within intellectual services. So again, this contributes towards the opportunity of globalization and the Philippines coming to the fore here. The next one is communication habits. You only need to look at millennials, young kids. They can be sitting next to each other and they're texting each other. The way that kids form relationships now are through chats, forums, Tinder, Facebook, whatever. People are demonstrating that they communicate well online within forums and develop communities there. This is reducing the friction for when 10 to 20 years from now, those millennials just see it as commonplace to interact with their colleagues, not shoulder to shoulder, but online through apps, through software, through project management software, through Slack, through Skype, through things like that. As that happens, as it becomes more the normalized form of communication, then
again, it brings us closer to a globalization and closer to a point where there is no geographical relevance. A fourth one is our culture, okay? Culture is becoming so homogenized now. The kids here are growing up on the same diet as the kids in Silicon Valley. Again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave that up to your judgment. But kids are learning on YouTube. Kids are, if they're into tech, they will be going to the same forums as the kids in Silicon Valley. They are watching Netflix, they are eating pizza, and they are playing basketball. The cultural homogeneity is incredible, and that is all both as a result of globalization, but equally will continue to bring this globalization, one market together. And that, again, is super powerful for the Philippines, where it sits. So, getting back to the money, how are we going to grow 30x to what we are now? Okay, that seems pretty audacious and unlikely. Okay, most economists would laugh that down. I hope you won't laugh me down. But the SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, they are the next wave. Okay, I like an analogy of IBM versus the kid. Okay, IBM was the giant. They sold supercomputers worth maybe $1 million to select companies that could afford $1 million back in the 70s, back in the 80s. They had a very small clientele, but they were printing money and they were very happy there. Then a kid came to them with a prospect of personal computing, okay? The big guys understandably could see no value in personal computing because the computers are $1,000 versus $1 million. And this is Microsoft. I'm not actually sure if that's Bill Gates, but that is one of Microsoft's first prototypes. But they didn't even suggest selling a computer for $1,000. They started by selling a license to software or a platform for sort of $50 or $100 per license per computer. So going super micro. But history, and there's a lot of examples of this, can show that there is immense value if you reach the miners, if you reach the small guys, okay? And of course, Facebook, one of the most valuable companies in the world, each individual, they have 600 or a billion clients now. Each individual client's making them a lot of money. So I believe that there's a lot of value in the small guys. So the big guys, the industry as it stands now, there's about 1.2 million employees. Now, follow me on this math, and I would love anyone to sort of talk to me afterwards, or now, about criticizing this, because I would love for the Philippines to adopt this as part of their narrative. The big industry now is 1.2 million employees. If you look at the size of the average client, it means that there's about 10 to maximum 15,000 clients here representing that 1.2 million employees, or the entire industry. There is huge saturation of the Fortune 1000s, of the big guys. They are all here. They have been outsourcing for 20 years. There's no more of them. And that is why this industry is somewhat plateauing, contracting, because really you're competing for the same pie, okay? Now, if we look at SMBs, I'll come back to that one soon. If we look at SMBs, they are the small giants, okay? SMBs, we did a study, there are 35 million small and medium-sized businesses in the West. That is the high-cost English-speaking West. We defined the catchment. They employ 100 million people, and they have $12 trillion combined revenues. That's big, okay, that's massive. You don't want to turn your back on $12 trillion worth of revenues. They employ about 60% of the workforce, and they contribute about 50% of the global GDP. So this is a huge, huge market. And coming back to the competitive tension, I believe, within this market, there are 35 million SMEs out there, of which about 0.5% of them outsource. You compare that to the big guys, the Fortune 1000s, and 95% of them outsource. The reason for that is very clear. 20 years ago, when they started, server costs were super expensive, infrastructure costs were super expensive. You needed to start with 500 people to justify setting up the facilities and being a pioneer out in the developing world. Now, everything is in the cloud, everything is cheap, everything is turnkey, everything is paid by the whatever minute or kilobyte, everything is flexible. The doorway is now open for these 35 million SMEs to outsource. The only thing that is stopping them is awareness and comfort and on-ramps into this market, because there is no reason why the small companies of the world cannot utilize these facilities as well as the big corporates. I think it's one of the best kept secrets of business, and I think it is the most transformative tool in business that at the moment is only really being utilized by the big guys. So in terms of the resilience of the SMB market, I find this huge, and again, this is incredible value for the industry. Everyone is talking about how do we get the industry out of the call centers and into the high value contribution work. SMB market is where you do that. Three main points. High value. The SMBs that outsource, they are, people in Silicon Valley, they might have a lot of funding. They can be up to 200, 300, 400 employees. They can have up to 200 million revenues. These aren't necessarily small businesses, but they act differently to the big enterprise, the big conglomerates. They're generally needing staff augmentation as opposed to process outsourcing. So they want people that they sit virtually shoulder to shoulder with in terms of their operations, in terms of their functions, in terms of their skill sets. That means that people don't want 1,000 CSRs sitting in a room. They want one or two coders, they want an accounts manager, they want a sales lead gen, and this is high value tasks that equal the tasks done in the home destination or the home country. SMBs, and I would I'd take comment on this, but they are more automation immune, okay? When you have a big process that's been carved out of a business and 1,000 people are doing that same role, that is ripe for efficiency, ripe for automation, ripe for optimization and AI, okay? Small businesses, by their nature, are more agile. They have smaller scale, so you can't replicate. They change, they pivot, and the nature of SMBs is that they need agile people. This means that they're automation immune, but also they are higher value functions because there's no spare seats on the bus of an SMB. Equally, high dependency. So, it's easy for outsourcing or process outsourcing in the bigger end of town to have a sales process, and then they just cut that campaign off once it's done. The SMB market, they are looking for staff augmentation. You cannot cut off, a bunch of 10 people sitting in the Philippines when your core team, when they're a part of the core team, and your total team count is maybe 100 people. You cannot. So there's higher dependency. Common roles here. We're seeing a lot of finance and accounting, human resource, legal, software, app development, animation. Philippines is really getting a good brand for animation. Engineering, architecture, digital content marketing. These are really high value, really exciting roles that both excite the people in the West thinking they can get really keen, well-qualified resources to do this, and it should excite the candidates in the Philippines, because these are really exciting jobs, career prospects, and they are doing it from their hometown with their family, but for the West, within a Western opportunity. So the kids, the new kids on the block, the market is fracturing, as any market does. We have the Upworks and freelancers of the world on your left, and then of course the Convergers, the big guys on the other end. In the middle are a lot of players. There's now a lot of players emerging. There's a lot of Australians with a lot of the sort of SMB players. And all of these guys, we are seeing huge growth in this market. Everyone is adding space, they're adding clients. All of the clients are absolutely wowed by the resources that they find in the Philippines, the sophistication that they see in the Philippines. This is not an industry that is sunsetting. This is an industry that is only just beginning, and any SME, SMB that ventures over here, they are just blown away by the quality of candidates, the eagerness of the staff, the sophistication of outsourcing, and the cost. Ultimately there has to be a cost arbitrage, or you would have someone in your home office, but these kids are growing as fast as they can possibly handle, and I believe there's much, much more to come. So why Philippines? It's important to note that I think there's 30 million jobs to come. So just to recap that, it is because there's 35 million SMEs, and I believe outsourcing with globalization will become as ubiquitous as everyone carrying a mobile phone. When you remove the borders or the geographical relevance of employment, you will naturally come to the cheaper areas, okay? Same quality, same deliverables, same skills, then the equilibrium will balance out. But the Philippines has to be careful, it has to be complacent, it can't be complacent, because India is out there, Eastern Europe is out there, there's a lot of talk about Vietnam. There's people that do not want to let this opportunity go. The Philippines has a fantastic head start, but it cannot be complacent. We, in our humble efforts, are trying to brand the Philippines as the Swiss banking of outsourcing. It isn't the biggest, but I believe hands down it is the best package. It's been doing it basically the longest, and it is most sophisticated and has the highest cultural alignment out of any of the other providers. The other supplying countries, when you are outsourcing at scale, then you can afford to insulate yourself from the friction of the cultural differences, of the language differences and things like that. When you are an SMB, you don't have as much insulation from the friction, so you need to bring the friction down. The friction being language barriers, the friction being cultural alignment, the friction being experience in outsourcing, and the friction being having those facilities there waiting for you. So the Philippines has an incredible head start. I believe it has, I believe it needs to do more on its branding. We need it's more fun in the Philippines for business, but the potential is massive and it's there for the taking. There are 30 million jobs coming, but I think we have to position ourselves well so that it doesn't fritter away and just disperse over the emerging economies, because there is an incredible USP here in the Philippines. So how do we do this? How do we harness this next wave? The SMB acts differently to the enterprise, okay? The industry needs to, or the big industry needs to adapt to cater to the SMBs. The SMB thinks more like a consumer, because really they are run by one or two people. enterprise corporates, they are run not by people, but by a decision process and accountability and teams and contracts and lawyers. SMBs are run by one or two heads of people that might have a bit of a Google for research, have a bit of a chat, and then make a decision whether they do it or not. Really significantly different. They also expect different things. Consumers are all evolving now. We're all evolving in what we demand from our service providers, whether it is B2C or B2B. People expect a lot of flexibility. They expect easy on-ramps, easy off-ramps, low contracts, flexibility, tie-ins and things like that. But how they engage is also very different. As consumers, we very rarely talk to anyone to book Uber. You do it through an app. You very rarely talk to anyone to book a hotel. You do it through booking.com. You don't talk to anyone about booking a flight. You do it through the platforms. Outsourcing is at a disadvantage because it is more complex. So people need venues where they can build their awareness, their comfort levels, their education about outsourcing. There is friction with outsourcing because you guys are in one country and the consumers are in another country. It is probably one of the only industries in the world where that is actually a defining rule, okay? And that is massive friction to people that don't know what outsourcing is. They're scared about it. They hear of the Philippines and see it as a developing nation. They think it's big and scary and only available to the big guys. These are all massive points of friction that we need to break down for them on their level. And their level is on Google, is in platforms, on research, okay? So branding, easy on-ramps, transparency. These are all things that platforms provide for people, okay? When you go to an expensive restaurant, when you book a super cool hotel in Greece, you would never go to the individual websites. A, you wouldn't know they're out there, and then B, you probably wouldn't trust them anyway because of course they're going to give good reviews. People now expect platforms, branding, and an internet presence. This brings me to my third point, which I say 3 times. We've got to go digital, okay? The IT BPM industry has IT in the beginning of it. It is meant to be, it is a high-tech, sophisticated industry, but it is very poorly represented online, okay? There is no good digital presence of outsourcing really on the market. There are different industries, different sectors, and BPOs are busy, they've got facilities to run, they've got a million things to do, but generally, how are we going to reach out to the 35 million SMBs without a digital interface? Super, super critical as individual players, but also as an industry. So this is how people interact. Basically online, people Google and people use platforms. This is an example of the travel industry, of all of the platforms that people use. The writing's small, but basically in preparation for travel, during travel, after travel, ensuring travel, and of course booking accommodation for travel. These are huge platforms and they power the industry. Arguably, you wouldn't have an industry without these platforms. There is no platform in outsourcing. There is no on-ramp for people in outsourcing. There is IBPAP. IBPAP do an incredible job, but they are more focused at the top end of the industry, personal relations, meeting people, building trust, that is an absolutely fantastic function. They do incredibly well, but there is not the interface with the consumer out there. And I think as a country, as an industry, that is sorely, sorely needed, okay? So the opportunity is, I believe, huge, and I would love other people's opinions. I would love to start a dialogue, a discussion about this, because I would love to start seeing this message get out into the community and give the Philippines something to strive towards and position itself as the future Singapore or the Swiss banking of outsourcing, because I believe that all of the ingredients are there, and we need to promote the heck out of this, because it really is the golden egg that that the Philippines has, you know, and I think that the Philippines really is world leading in this supply. So there used to be millions of barriers to the Philippines. It's had a tough past. You know, it's been colonized, like it's had a lot of hardship. It was a developing nation, and there were millions of barriers. You were separated geographically, you know, and communications were poor, and then there was political instability. Now, there are no barriers, okay? There's only really us and the competition, okay? There is a huge opportunity here, I believe, to make a $600 billion industry out of this by enticing SMEs, SMBs into the Philippines by showcasing this incredible talent that we have here. And I believe that the route to market is by getting online and showcasing this. So, and again, outsourcing, you know, there's no borders to this. There's no geographical relevance. It is just output and skills and everything that the Philippines has and can offer. I believe once you get through all of that, then there is no reason why there isn't equal opportunity for Filipinos to be working on Wall Street and in Amazon, that's Amazon's headquarters, from their own barangay, you know, from the Philippines, because it will become one world market, and, you know, the opportunity is there to level out this playing field and become one economic hub, and we'll all be better off for that. Specifically, the Philippines will really, you know, come a long way if that comes to fruition. Thank you.